What up, this is Matt with GearZombie, and today we are going to discuss my favorite feature with the new Line 6 Helix 3.0 firmware, the Poly Capo, or Poly Capo, depending on what side of the tracks you're from. Okay, so Line 6 finally released the 3.0 update, and there's all kinds of cool things. We're not going to go over them all in this video. I'm going to go over some of my favorites in individual videos, and we're going to try some of the stuff out. But the one I wanted to do a video on first was the Poly Capo. When the firmware first dropped, I had it installed like a couple hours later. I was actually quite impressed with the Poly Capo. Now, I've played with a lot of different pitch shifting types of things. Played with a Digitech drop pedal, which is pretty good. I also went through a few different Variax guitars. I'll put a card up here so you can take a look at those. And probably the most common theme with all of these is that everybody complains about them. And when I first loaded the firmware, I hadn't had a chance to go out and look online and see everybody complain about this particular effect. And so I sat down with it and I played around, and I was genuinely impressed with how well it tracked, how genuine it sounded, up to a point, which is one thing that all of these have in common. It doesn't matter if you're using a drop pedal, Variax guitar, this firmware here, or the Axe-Fx pitch shifting. They all do reasonably well, some better than others, but then the farther that you get away from your actual mechanical tuning, the physical tuning of your guitar, the farther you drift away, the more difficulties that you may experience. What I had found when I sat down and played with it was that these sort of anomalies or deficiencies weren't as evident in the Line 6 Helix version of your pitch shifting as they would be in some of the competitors. What I had noticed was that you can get quite a bit farther away and it stays relatively honest. There's a small bit of latency, and I think your latency tends to increase the further you get away from your physical tuning, but it's nothing that isn't usable, which is something that I saw a lot of people complaining about. The latency is so horrible. And it's just not that bad. So before we really start tearing this apart, I recorded a quick tune. I used palm mutes and open picking and some bendies and some harmonics and whatnot. And I detuned it whole steps all the way down an octave. And then we'll come back and we'll dive a lot deeper into this and see if the cork sniffer naysayers are actually correct. If this is as terrible as they say it is. It's not. First, I'm just playing just your run-of-the-mill Charvel San Dimas with, I don't remember what Duncans are loaded in this. I'd have to look, but it's a stock San Dimas with a Floyd. Nothing special. Let's shut the pitch off. Okay, and we're gonna go through this front to back as best we can. So basically, I'm just running an amp and cab. Nothing special. What do I got? The Rev Purple going through the 412 Kali V30 sim. So I'm not even using a different IR. I'm just using a stock cab. So no fluff here. Just amp and cab, as you can see. I have the pitch block before the amp and cab, which is where you're going to want it. You don't want to put it after because it'll be a snarly mess. So you put the pitch before. The one thing I do have in front is a gate, and that is mostly because I have a noisy room. Right now, I'm drop D. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that there is a sound difference when you turn the capo on. Like if I just have it on, if you can see right here, the interval is set at 0, okay? Which means that I'm not changing the pitch at all. Now we also have tracking options here. So you can run it as super stable, or you can run it as super fast. If you run it as super fast, it'll get iffy. It'll get iffy early. What I found is that running just the stable was fast enough that it reduced the latency. There will be a little more latency if you crank it all the way up, but it will do a better job. I didn't notice that there was that much of a difference in stability between having it dialed down a notch and having it cranked all the way up, but I did notice a difference in latency. So this seems to work just fine. You also have an auto EQ. Your mix, you're gonna want your mix up at 100%, unless you wanna harmonize, which you could do. So there's your fifth. So you could, run it that way if you wanted to. But for the majority of us, and for this particular example, we're gonna run it at 100% so it completely masks out everything else. So let's start with this. This is it. Now let's shut it off. So there is a sonic difference. I don't think that's a big deal. We're gonna travel down. Latency, I don't see a huge problem with. Even if I take it all the way down, which doesn't sound good, okay? But even with that, who's going down that low? had this song that we used to play. The song was called 1987. And the song was written pretty much standard. And we ended up and this is with a standard tuned guitar. If I was going to try to sonically travel across tunings, I would recommend taking a guitar that is tuned down physically a little further, and then you can kind of travel around even more. Let's try that real quick. So this is in C sharp. Actually, I think this is where 1987 ended up. But we come here to pitch. Let's turn this on. We're actually +2 here. So don't let the internet BS you. This is a good workable solution, and the rest of the 3.0 firmware update for the Helix is pretty darn cool. So jump on it, get at it, and if you liked anything I had going on here, hit like, hit subscribe, hit subscribe, hit subscribe, and until next time, GearZombie.